The portion of the video that summarizes the retrieving of a portfolio is such an important part of the video that it has been moved here to the beginning. It is as follows. All right, we covered a lot of ground in this video on this code review of the portfolio return. Didn't cover everything. It covered the major sections. One key point I want you to leave with is what we've already covered. So if you remember just one thing about this entire code review, is we realize that in this view portfolio code, VBA code, there is a call to the portfolio authentication function. And when we go search for that function, it's in the module 5 here. And down in this code, probably the most critical step to keep in mind is that it eventually places a valid PID in the Manage work tab in cell 815. And then from there, the Manage, when 815 gets updated with the PID name, then the Manage Visual BA code takes over based on that change event, and then causes a lot of pricing, journal, just all the data pull is then done in the Manage worksheet code. Okay, back to the original video. This video is a VBA code walkthrough of the portfolio return application. This was developed in between, roughly 2017 to 2019 by Brian Horn. If interested in the navigation and just the user side of the application, suggested that go out to PolarisInvesting.com website, click on YouTube, go out to the Polaris Investing YouTube channel. At the bottom here of the welcome screen, you can see that there's a playlist on the portfolio return app, and I explain how in a series of videos exactly how the user interacts with the spreadsheet. Well, to get to the VBA code, you need to enter the password that protects the VBA project. Make note that the portfolio return spreadsheet uses the same password to protect the view portfolio and view journal worksheets. Alright, next I'm going to discuss the main worksheet VBA modules. The main 3 worksheets that the user interacts with are shown: view portfolio, and then view journal, which shows the details behind the journal, but these are strictly for viewing, and then the update worksheet is for user can make changes to journal entries. Now, other worksheets that want to unhide include the Manage and the lists, and then these other ones. There's Dropbox is just more. I'll temporarily unhide it to show you that it's just instructional, something that when it's up on posted on Dropbox or whatever, this first worksheet of the spreadsheet is viewable, and so it just gives instructions on how to download, but there's no code behind this, so I'm going to hide it back. And then the about, this gives user information, how to use the application, but again, there's no code behind this one either, so just hide it. And then another one here is trusted, which is this text about the way that the Excel environment should be set up if it's going to be pulled from the internet, so the user is going to be assured that not only this spreadsheet but any spreadsheet they pull from the internet is trusted before they enable it and run the VBA code in the spreadsheet. Now, if we go out to developer, we'll see that there are some other worksheets, namely the prices worksheet, that's clandestined or hidden all the time. So for this video, I want to unhide it. Also want to unhide where the internal rate of return data is kept. Properties, you want to make it invisible. Different modules, the way they're laid out is module 1 contains primarily just generic provided functions that have been written by myself over the last several years. It just not specific to the spreadsheet, but just functions that are needed in general. Now the XIRR short subroutine or function is specific to this worksheet. It replaces the or functionally equivalent to the XIRR function built in Excel, but this one is more less of a black box and has some advantages that may go through. The random function, not really used, and anyway, just kind of some general functions besides that XIRR. Module 2 is more specific to this worksheet, and things like the tickers, goes out and grabs tickers, helps you with column spaced variables, price history, but a lot of it has to do with going out and getting information from the internet through these web services. So they're EDO kind of functions. Module 3 used for debugging or tracing. Module 4, this code really isn't used, and not really sure what the history is behind this code, but it's in here in case any of these kind of very general functions are needed. Here's one like this: cleans your namespace up, and here's even one if you want to define a button, anyway, really not used in this application. And then module 5 is specific to the application. It can just place to park some subroutines that are used by various parts of the code. Now the different sheets, VBA code. View portfolio is one we'll be going over quite a bit. View journal, there is less code because it's primarily for just viewing the details of what's in the portfolio. There is no code in Dropbox. Like I said, it's just there to be displayed. The worksheet is there to be displayed when up on to be the first tab when it's up on the internet and being downloaded. Manage tab, yeah, that's where like a lot of spreadsheets that I write have a separate worksheet that has gray areas where you can change how the spreadsheet works. And then the way this spreadsheet VBA code is designed is that when some of those values change, therefore the event worksheet changed, some things are done based on those change events. Update journal, because that is where the user can update their journal entries. There is code there that we'll be going through. And view portfolio, already said that's where the main worksheet where the user interacts with the spreadsheet. We'll be going through that. Prices is specific to things that go on the prices worksheet that we'll cover. Lists, it really does nothing more than just make sure that when the user moves over, activates that worksheet, that auto calculation is on. That's just essentially the same thing as going over here into the formulas and is making sure that this automatic calculation is set to on. IRR worksheet is where the internal rate of return calculations are performed. Trusted, that's this text that I showed you earlier, no VBA code. And about, the only thing that's shown in the about, or the VBA code around the about module, is just a check whenever the spreadsheet is activated, it checks to see if you're running the latest version or not, and then a pop-up occurs if you're not on the latest version. And then the workbook, this workbook code, the main two events is what to do when the workbook opens, but because some things that have been talked about in other videos is that when you first open or grab the spreadsheet off the internet, and the user has their protection Excel environment set up properly, they're in protected mode and all VBA code is disabled. So this event code never runs, even after the user would hit enable to enable content. The spreadsheet's already open, so the time for this event to run is come and gone, so it just doesn't execute. So you can see here that things have been commented out of this code, and even this code, when it's being downloaded off the internet, is not executed. Now, if it were not coming off the internet, or the user has downloaded it, enabled it, and stored it locally, and now brings it back up when the spreadsheet first opens, it just immediately goes into a manual execution mode until the user does some things. Now, the close event, that is, regardless if it comes off the downloaded off the internet or not, that is code. And a lot of the shutdown code is contained in this function called cleanup that's in module 5 that we'll be going over later. Alright, so that's roughly the layout of things and the modules. So next we'll be going through specific VBA code. Majority of the user activity occurs here on the view portfolio worksheet, and through these three input boxes, E1, E8, and J6. So let's look at each one of them individually real quick here. E1, user is primarily just selecting a portfolio or choosing to create a new portfolio. Here in the E8, this is more of a kind of a maintenance or service box where users can select to do certain things, and you will see later on the VBA code this pretty much comes down to checking what they selected here and then going off to one of many subroutines. And then here in J6, like the name implies, they're just clicking that and causing prices to be updated. So where most of the activity though occurs is up here when a portfolio is selected. So I'm going to go ahead and select a portfolio and make sure you understand what goes on there. If you notice down here, you're seeing, as things moving along, you're seeing status information. We're doing a system check right now. We're now clearing this landing area here in the view portfolio area where the result sets will be placed. We're authenticating back against the SQL Server and then retrieving prices, and then retrieving journal entries to display on the journal page, calculating internal rates of return that will be shown over here, and then when all that is done, we see individual stock listed with their stock return, and then this view portfolio page has been updated. No additional data has been brought into the update journal. If the user were to go back up here and select or enter blank here and then its return, you see here that since there's no portfolio, it just clear out landing area where the result sets normally would go. So view portfolio is now cleared out and view journal is also cleared out. Well, let's go walk through the VBA code that goes on when a user makes a selection here in cell E1. Now, the thing we're going to notice is that the Manage module will have a lot of code that gets executed when things change in the cell E1, and the reason for that is that the VBA code behind cell E1 will set flags that are in the Manage tab, and then when those are set values, and when those values change, it kicks off VBA code that deals with the events dealing with the Manage tab. So here we are looking at the View Portfolio module, VBA module. And notice here at the top is if the user is ever on another worksheet and changes over to this worksheet, if an option is selected on the Manage tab to display this message about a reminder about needing to always refresh the contents of E1, then this would be flashed every time, or a message would pop up every time they switch. Now, it also indicates that once the message is displayed, a flag is set on the Manage tab such that it won't be, if the user were to leave the worksheet, come back again to view portfolio, the reminder would not be repeatedly shown. It's just a reminder that's thrown up the first time the user comes back to the view portfolio page. All right. Where most of the action occurs, though, as a result of changes from the view portfolio are here under the worksheet change event. And so here we are looking for see if a change occurred in E1, or if there was a change in some values on the Manage page. But let's just go with the straightforward case of user entered or selected a portfolio in cell E1. First thing is done is a check to see if the startup system check has been run already. Is this the first activity we've seen in the worksheet since the worksheets opened up? And if so, we go through a system check. So you can see here the application status bar. That's where system check is shown. It goes into manual mode and checks to see if the date is unique or different than what's currently stored out in the Manage tab. If so, it updates the date on the Manage tab. It updates the time that on the spreadsheet, and also the name of the worksheet. Then checks the and this is primarily data that can be used by other VBA code during the life of the session with the spreadsheet, and not have to constantly go out and use a dynamic function to grab the date or the time. All right, next a check is made for the application or the version that the user is using, and then if it's too early of a version, a message is displayed. Next, checks to see if there's internet connection. If not, it throws up a message saying that don't seem to currently have access to the internet. Next, it'll go out and run a function that determines the public facing IP address of the computer that the spreadsheet is currently running on. Then it checks the Manage tab to see if the user has opted out of having personal identifiable information sent back to SQL Server to record the session. If they're still in, they haven't defaulted out, then a call is made to a function that will now go back to SQL Server, record the time using the now, so it gets the current time. Now it could have used the value here on the home page in A2, but we've turned calculation into manual mode. So this, in Excel, this would be a vault function, but here in VBA, particularly with the calculation turned off, it's not causing a recalculation. So this is good as pulling from cell A2. All right, next the value that was recorded in A3, namely the name of the worksheet, is passed along. The value in B1, which is the current version of the spreadsheet, is passed along. The Excel version that the system is using, A14, is the public IP address, and then we pass the name of the computer name and username back, and it's logged. Now if the user were to opt out, you can see here that some of the values, particularly the last two about the computer name and the username and the public IP address, or a set of actual values are just hard-coded to be the value opt out. The check is made to see that logging back to SQL Server successfully completed, and if it failed, then a message has popped up about some kind of connectivity problem. Now this is a different connectivity problem than what would have been flagged up here. That's just a check to see if you can get to the internet. This is a check to see if you can get to SQL Server by virtue of trying to log this information to SQL Server. And then the check is made for latest version, and if you're not working, and this calls the backend SQL Server to get the latest version. And then last, the check is made to see if there's a message specific to this, if they haven't opted out, specific to the computer name and username, or whether there's a just a general message that's needing to be displayed. And then if so, that eventually gets displayed in this area here where we're currently seeing visit Polaris website to view practical evaluations. Okay, next a check is made to see if can get to some of these web services to get stock price information. So again, the first check was, can we get to the internet? The next check was, can we get to SQL Server? Now this is a check, can we get to web services to get pricing information? Because we get pricing information from two main sources. They're both checked just by calling Microsoft to see if we get back valid information. And if it's blank, then we determine that there's some problem. We throw out the message. Okay, next, a call is made to go get some information about the stock market, particularly the risk-free rate, the equity risk premium, and the dividend yield on the S&P 500, and those values are placed in the Manage tab. And then the last major step of this initial startup code is doing a cleanup, just make sure things are formulas and things are what we expect. So to go out there and look at that, if we go out here to module F5, and here we are in the cleanup code. It marks that we are in the process of cleaning up. It cleans up filters. Just make sure here on startup of the spreadsheet everything is as expected. We copy formulas and formatting, all that kind of thing, from columns P, and then columns O. Set a lot of formatting things on the view portfolio. Make sure background colors and things are as expected. Make sure that drop-down selections in cell E8 are whatever set to a proper default. That value in V6 on view portfolio, make sure it's set to the default, expected default. Make sure formulas are set as expected. So it's just general, just checking the spreadsheet out, making sure everything is as expected, and then it sets the cursors and scrolling and things like that on all the different worksheets. And then it marks that the cleanup is finished. And then we go into automated calculation and set screen updating to true, indicate that now we have gone through a complete work or spreadsheet initialization. Okay, all the code we just went through is only executed when the spreadsheet is first opened. It normally would have been in the ThisWorkBook workbook open, but because of the problem with potentially downloading it off the internet, it had to be that kind of code had to be done really upon the first in this spreadsheet, it's upon the first portfolio that's selected. All right, so next is the repetitive work that's typically done. Check is made in E1 to see if the user selected create a portfolio, or if not, check is made to see if what they did select, does it exist. So it makes a call out to SQL Server, and if it comes back fail, then you've got a situation where either they didn't put in create, but the portfolio they indicated doesn't exist. So an error message is put up about it not existing. The list, we haven't really talked about that, but if go here and unhide lists, it currently is just a list of portfolios that the user has the option of selecting in the pull down. Well, it doesn't mean those portfolios exist. So what the code is saying at this point is that you may want to update your list because it appears you've got an item that doesn't even exist. Okay, assuming the item doesn't exist, it just clears out the entry in E1, makes it blank, and then clears everything out in the results set landing area on both the View Portfolio and View Journal. It says that we've had a problem, so don't indicate in a flag on the Manage tab that don't call portfolio authentication. And then we come down here and it says if the value in C11 is true, then we're going to move forward. But you can see in the example we just, or the code thread that we were going through previously, it was an example of getting set to false. But assuming that the user entered a valid portfolio, this would be true, and therefore now we're really looking at more of the typical code that gets executed. It's not that initial spreadsheet initialization code. It's not if the user entered an invalid portfolio or what's called a portfolio ID PID. You've got a normal situation. So this is where you see the application status bar go into clearing. You clear out the landing area for the result sets in both the View Portfolio and the Journal Portfolio, and do some other clearing of some values that are used to highlight particular rows on the View Portfolio and View Journal. Make sure some formulas are what is expected, and then down here, if there was no problems with accessing the internet, we're going to go off and attempt to contact SQL Server and authenticate the user. Now, what didn't show up, if the portfolio were to have a password associated with it, when the user first selected that portfolio, they would have been prompted for a password. Password would have been stored on the Manage tab, and then when we make this call to authenticate, we would be pulling the PID and the user password from the Manage tab when we call this routine called portfolio authentication. After portfolio authentication is called, a quick check is made to see if there's any notification specific to this public IP and username, and then it will throw up a message saying go check your email. And we'll talk about this, and we're talking about cell E8 on the View Portfolio page, but it's just a check here to see if there is some outstanding notification or mail for this particular spreadsheet user. So most of the work that typically goes on around a portfolio, assuming there's no errors on resetting or when the spreadsheet first comes up, or with the portfolio that the user selected, it's in this function called portfolio authentication. So let's go look at it. The portfolio authentication subroutine is in this module 5, and at this point we've already checked for that we're dealing with a valid portfolio. So it just simply says, well, did you by chance enter in create portfolio? And if you did, then we're going to do some steps here to prompt the user for a new name and go through the steps to create a new portfolio. Otherwise, it's just going to record what the user typed in cell E1 and or set it as the valid PID that it'll be working with going forward. Again, here's the if we're in create mode, then this code here is done, and it loops through to make sure that user is entering a valid portfolio ID, and that includes it not already existing, or it's got a valid portfolio ID entered. And then a check has gone off to see if the passcode associated with this portfolio is Polaris, which essentially means there is no password. Or if this portfolio has already been opened previously, was the previously opened portfolio, there's no reason to re-authenticate. It's just the user's doing a refresh. So if it's one of those two conditions, it assumes the password is correct. Now it does a check here, even if it is correct, assumes to be correct, that it'll set it either to Polaris, or it'll grab the existing passcode that was recorded the previous the time that the portfolio was the immediate predecessor to this portfolio. If it was the same portfolio, that means the passcode that the user had previously entered is still out there on the Manage tab, so it grabs that password, so the user doesn't have to re-enter it when they're apparently just refreshing the data. All right, so this else condition down here is where the user needs to enter the password associated with the PID. It means that this PID does not have the generic, essentially no password Polaris associated with it, and the user has just entered a new PID that previously hadn't been entered, so we don't have the password already stored out on the Manage tab. So here's the code that loops through asking the user to enter a passcode. All right, so this else condition down here is where the user needs to enter the password associated with the PID. It means that this PID does not have the generic, essentially no password Polaris associated with it, and the user has just entered a new PID that previously hadn't been entered, so we don't have the password already stored out on the Manage tab. So here's the code that loops through asking the user to enter a passcode. Now it loops through till you hit the maximum number of passcode attempts, and that value is set up here in the code, so it's not something on the Manage tab. Otherwise the user could go out and change it and allow themselves to have a high number of attempts, so it's hard-coded here in the VBA code. All right, after authentication, then it is on the last final steps where it just checks to see if a new PID has been created by the authentication completion status setting. And if it is indicating a PID was created, it'll then go out and append to the back end of the worksheets list that a new PID is available. Therefore, then when the user does the drop down in cell E1, they'll see this new PID now listed. Then it goes and calls a function called Manage List, which just cleans up this Manage List so that the first row of the list is always blank, the second is Create Portfolio, and Model is always listed at the end. So the user's new PID would be, let's say like here, Suspect. It would be towards the appended towards the end, but it wouldn't be at the very end after this Manage List function is called. Model would be. Since this video was originally recorded, next, cell C11 in the Manage worksheet is set to false, and E1 in the View Portfolio worksheet is set to the active PID only if a new PID was just added, or the user canceled entering a new PID, or canceled entering a passcode, or the maximum attempts to enter a passcode is exceeded. This results in Model Portfolio being used as a substitute. And then the passcode is set to recorded in the Manage tab along with the PID. Now it's important to know, as soon as the PID gets updated, this invokes portfolio, journal queries, and price updates through the change event on the Manage tab. So this is very critical, why this has to be the very last thing done, and why the passcode has to be entered first on the Manage tab, record on the Manage tab, then the PID, because again, it's the PID update that causes all the information to be go out and grabbed. And the stored procedures back to stored SQL Server such that the PID and the passcode are passed in on every request to verify that the user passcode is correct before the information is pulled back, allowed to be returned. So the passcode has got to be, correct password has got to be recorded first before you change the PID. I'm going to change this to really call this out as a very critical step. All right, turning back to the View Portfolio module where we called this Portfolio Authenticate. Already went through what this next step is, and so it pretty much finishes up. Well, with A15 cell on the Manage worksheet being such a critical value that when it gets updated, that's when all the data pulls occur. Let's go look at that code on the Manage tab. You can see here that the change event A15 is the only change event that there's code for. So let's go through it. You can see here when the target address is A15 and the value that's in A15 is a valid PID, meaning it's not blank. Then some things are cleared out dealing with the the billboard area, and then clear ticker row who's has to do with highlighting a particular row. We clear it out. We save some environment. Because the worksheets are protected, we have to go out and record about information about the protection, so that when we're all done here, we're going to unprotect them. Make sure that values on the view portfolio worksheet are set to what we expect, and then eventually we're going to come down here and proceed to get price information, and then we're going to get historical price information from 1 year ago, this statement here, and then going to get historical price information from 3 months ago, and then we're going to go get the journal. You can see here that there's calls to that application status to get updated as we're doing this. So we go out and get journal, run the journal query, pass in the PID and the passcode, and then we go get the portfolio by calling, and then we log the fact that we did access this PID. So we on the back end SQL Server, we have some idea of the which portfolios are being accessed most often, and calculate the internal rates of return. We restore some things, and then display the results. All right, we just went through the most important code in VBA code in the spreadsheet, but so I'm going to quickly go through the remaining. Here in cell E8, you do menu selections, and so if we go look at the change event dealing with this worksheet, the view portfolio, we can see down here E8, and then all it's doing is just looking to see what was selected in E8, and then calling a corresponding function. And I'll let you go look at these functions, but they're fairly straight, self-contained as to what is done when one of these selections is made in E8. The third major selection that a user can make on this view portfolio worksheet is the select the update prices. So now we go to here and into the select change code of the view portfolio VBA code. You can see here that it checks for J6. If the target address is J6, it starts off by clearing on the view portfolio worksheet J3, which has some downstream cells that reference it, so when it gets cleared, it causes those other formulas that dealing with time to be updated. But this code here really doesn't do much, because if there's no current active PID selected, the downstream cells will return blanks. So this next check is more relevant in that it looks to see if J6 has been pressed and or clicked on, and that there's an active PID being displayed. Then it clears the and causes the downstream cells that execute on next recalculation, and you see the date get updated. Then it goes off and it goes through code of unprotecting the sheet so that both journal and portfolio, so that new information can be updated dealing with retrieving these prices. Then the prices are based on the date. You go out and get the prices, and then this goes through the steps to display and recalculate everything on the view journal and view portfolio worksheets, and then it sets the protection back, and that's how that basically works. That should be noted on the prices. In the prices module, there's a change event that looks very similar based on the cell J1, and user has a valid PIN. It goes through similar steps. But clicking to update current prices here is just a troubleshooting step. So these should be almost identical to the steps we just went through. But again, it's been repeated on the prices worksheet just to have a method to do some troubleshooting. I just want to point out some VBA code related to the IIR_WS stands for Internal Rate of Return worksheet. And to do that, I brought in some live data using the model portfolio. So if we go look at the code that's on the IRR worksheet, you see here that there is some kind of tricky code here that looks for on every calculation, looks to see if cells G6 and G7 ever change, and if they do, then it sets G6 equal to G7. And that's just a tricky way to create a user change event, because the code down here on change is only if a user makes a change. So if it's a downstream change, which cell J7 actually is, if we go look at the what's on the internal J7, you see here that it's a formula having to do with whether J8 changes or not. As soon as J8 changes, then downstream to that we update the time. But that won't cause a change event to occur that the time has changed. And so it was just a kind of a tricky way to initiate a change event around that cell. So here we see if J6 does change by virtue of forcing the change to the worksheet calculate event. We then do some things here, primarily going out and selecting from the back-end database S&P 500 data. We do it here and also here. So don't want you to be too confused by what's going on here. It's just a forced user change event that's downstream to an actual user change event, and then going out and grabbing S&P 500 data. Another thing dealing with this worksheet besides the VBA code is the worksheet itself. It primarily just here in this area of the worksheet is all the journal entries dealing with different aspects of the journal entries, and it's actually more involved than I want to get into here, but suffice to say that in order to calculate internal rate of return, need to have cash flows that represent where we were at the beginning when these stocks were first purchased, the actual activity that occurred during the life of the stocks, and then at the certain date that we're looking at as the end date, we have to recalculate what the value of the stocks are at that end date. And then here in the blue is some dummy transactions that are forced in order to make the internal rate of return XIRR function work properly when it's being selected on the Manage tab. So you can see here that you can select whether you want the Polaris built-in function, which was added later because there got to be so many problems with the built-in XIRR function and just got too complicated. So built own XIRR routine that at least it's not a black box, know exactly what it's doing. But here in the prices worksheet had to do a lot of things, or IRR worksheet had to do a lot of things over here in the blue to just calculate dummy transactions and force it in. But when we select the Polaris XIRR routine, we don't have to force in all those dummy transactions. Next thing we're going to talk about is the Update Journal worksheet, and on it there's really four main inputs where the users enter data down in this workspace area, or they enter a specific transaction ID that they pick up off the view journal, and then they either hit delete, which would cause those journal entries to be deleted from the SQL Server database, or after making new entries they would hit add. And then once they're done they hit clear to clear off the workspace area to clear off this area. Since this video was originally recorded, some additional functionality has been added around assisting the user in making a journal entry, specifically around the date, the ticker, type, and comment. For more information, see the Update Journal video around the 9-minute mark. So let's take a look at the VBA code behind basic and advanced user assistance. It's all dealing with the select change. And we come down here to the automatic basic assist. You can see here that when cell in column C, which is the date column, every time you click on it, it'll rotate between values. Along with that is changes to column B, because the way the changes work is you start off in B, come into C on the same row. And I'll leave it up to the viewer to go through this, but important to know that these two go together, changes in column B with changes in column C. Automatic ticker assist is a little more straightforward. It just every time you come into the cell, it toggles between values. The type which is part of expanded assist, is based on whether there's a value in cell C4, and if there is, then it'll offer assistance with different types of types being displayed. And then the last assist, expanded assist, is with the comment. And as you move into the comment will change, and also it'll assist you in incrementing the check number. So these two kind of go together. Also, since this video was originally recorded, this point-in-time rollback functionality has been added. For more information on it, see the Portfolio Return Application Update Journal video around the 13-minute mark. When the user selects F1 on the Update Journal worksheet, this code here is executed. First thing it does is it checks for a PID, then a passcode, and then the date the spreadsheet was open. It then prompts the users if they're sure they want to do a rollback. If the user responds yes, it makes sure again that they definitely want to do that because it is an irreversible operation. If they say they do again, then this function journal rollback is called, and then based on the success or failure of that, different messages are displayed. Here's the journal rollback function. You notice that it's written in a slightly different style than like journal insert or journal delete. And the reason it's written in a little different style is it ensures a single session for multiple commands, as opposed to splitting multiple commands across different connections, which OLADB does by default using connection pooling. Connection pooling reduces the overhead of setting up new connections by using a fixed set of reusable connections. Now with insert and delete and other functions like it, it's just simply one command, so you just do it here. But here in the journal rollback, we're setting up the connection and then issuing a command in that connection. So you could, in theory, have multiple commands before you close the connection. So again, this style is done to ensure a single session. Now, it wasn't needed for journal rollback because it ended up only needing one command, namely call the stored procedure journal rollback. But if multiple commands were needed, this would be the preferred way to issue multiple commands while using just a single connection. Here's the SQL Server Stored Procedure journal rollback. You can see the three input parameters, namely the PID, the passcode, and the date of the rollback. First thing it does is it goes out to the portfolio credentials table and validates whether the credentials of PID and passcode are correct or not. If it is correct, then it'll either add back previously deleted journal entries or delete added journal entries, both based on the date of the operation relative to the date of the rollback that's been requested. Now, the thing you should point out about the deleting and the adding is there's a maximum of 2 different entries in the portfolio journal audit table with the same JID. If there's only one, then that means it was either a delete or an add. But if there's a pair of them, then that means if you had a delete, then there was an add that was done before that in the period that's after the date of the rollback. Or if you're looking to delete, it would mean that there was a delete done after the add. Therefore, there's a pair and they cancel each other out. So the actual deleting or adding of a journal entry back will only be done if there was no paired add or delete associated with that JID. And then the last thing it does is it removes audit entries for transactions that were rolled back. Since this video was originally recorded, the journal rollback stored procedure has been updated to include set identity insert on and off, which requires alter table permission, running the stored procedure with execute as owner, and closing insert, delete, and logging in a database transaction, and verbose return message. Setting identity insert on allows the original JID of a previously deleted journal entry to be reinserted into the portfolio journal table. Setting identity insert requires alter permissions on the portfolio journal table, which users do not have. Users have execute permission on the stored procedure, which also gives them insert and delete permission, but not alter permission. Running the stored procedure with execute as owner allows the use of identity insert in the stored procedure. To ensure identity insert is turned off, it is included in a database transaction. Insert, delete, and logging are also included in the same database transaction. Verbose return message includes the date time, starting log rolled back, and the number of adds and deletes rolled back. Okay, back to the previous video segment. In order to populate this portfolio journal audit table, both the journal insert stored procedure and the journal delete stored procedure have been updated. Include code that inserts into the audit table. Bottom here shows a snippet of the portfolio journal audit table. Each row in the table contains a date, the batch number, the ticker, the type, price, number of shares, and comment, pretty much the journal entry itself. It also includes the operation, add or delete, an audit ID, and then the date that the add or delete was performed. Also, since this video was originally recorded, quite a bit of functionality has been added to support tags and comments. Suggested that you look at the Portfolio Return app Reserve Tickers Cash Bond comment video around the 21 minute and 30 second mark for a full discussion on tags. Recall tags start with the pound or hashtag and then followed by a name. In this case, we're seeing just a tag name of $. But if I scroll up, I'll see other tags here that for instance, here's one called plus income paycheck, another one called $deduct, and then you can even have multiple tag in the same comment. Here's the second tag, hashtag medical insurance. Over here on the clip JIDs worksheet, which we'll be discussing more, you see a complete list of all the tags, the names of tags that have been identified in this particular portfolio. To identify tags, a subroutine called tag identification has been written. It is called from the Manage tag after a valid portfolio name has been entered in. So after the journal and the portfolio query is done, you see here down towards the bottom of this existing VBA code, there's been added tag identification call at the very end. So now we're going to go through what this subroutine does. First thing it's done is that the journal array entries are moved into a local array called VArray. Now the reason that's done is that there's actually multiple representations of the journal array, and I won't go through what the differences are. But in this instance, wanted to see the one that shows the number of shares along with all the other journal entries. And so to be flexible enough to be able to use different versions of the journal array, have this line here and just copy it into a local array, then work from that. Then what's done next is a call routine that we'll go through later that just does some resetting, setting things back to default values. And then you come down here and you start just looping through every journal entry in the portfolio. And then inside looping through each journal entry, you loop through each found tag within a comment. So you find a comment, you note the end of the, where you found, or you find a tag, you note the end of that tag, you process the tag, you loop back around, look from the end of that previous tag onto the end of the comment, look for additional tags. And that's how this code here is walking through each tag of the of a specific comment, where this outer loop is walking through each journal entry or its comment of that journal entry. So to go into more detail in the inner loop here, you can see here that it notes the starting position of kind of where it left off previously in this comment of this journal entry. It calls a subroutine to grab the next tag name in the comment, and if there is a next tag name, meaning it's not null, then it'll call another subroutine to append that tag name onto a list, and that's the list that eventually is shown there in the clip JIDs worksheet. Also, it looks to see if the tag name that was found starts with a $, because that's a unique tag name that has to do with check numbers. And then you see here a subroutine is called to determine the check number associated with the $, tag name. And then one other special condition is if the tag name is another unique tag called vertical bar, period, then it does some specific things here that we'll talk more about when we talk about this special tag later on. Then when it's all done looping through each journal entry and the comments of each journal entry, it will then sort the tag names and the check numbers. And so it calls a subroutine called sort array to do both sorting. In one instance, it calls it with the tag name array that was built as you loop through previously, and then the other one is the check num array. It was built from looping earlier. And you can see the check num array and the tag name array are populated when this append object in each case is called to append either the tag name array or the check num array. Then specific columns in clip JIDs worksheet are populated, namely column B, which is the sorted unique tag names, column L, which is the sorted check numbers, and then column Z, which is a list of unique consolidated tag names, namely tag names that have the same prefix up to the first underscore. Okay, next we're going to talk about subroutines and functions that are called by the tag identification subroutine. Right above it, you can see the append object that we briefly discussed. Now, a parameter that's passed in is whether you want to include or exclude duplicates, and then it just loops through looking for the if there's a duplicate and then appending to the end. If it's not, another one we haven't talked about yet that's not called directly from the tag identification subroutine is the comment object error. but it's looking through if it's a tag name, or if the object is a tag name, or if the object name is a check number, it'll validate that it meets certain criteria and then return either a true or false if it detects some kind of a malformed tag name or check number. Okay, another function here is getting the next tag name. Essentially, it returns the tag name just using the mid-string function, taking the comment that was the fragment of the comment that was passed in and where it found the next tag name, and then the start and the end, and then returns the tag name. Another function here is if there's a parameter associated with a tag, it'll return the parameter value. Pass in the comment the tag name associated with the parameter that you're looking for, then a tag name, or a parameter. If there's a parameter associated with the tag name, it's returned. And then up here, a special version of returning a parameter, namely a check number, with similar logic as it walks through and based on the tag that was found, which is $sign. So you don't need to pass that in. Determines the next check number. Next subroutine we'll discuss here is the sort array. We saw used several times in the tag identification subroutine. But what's get passed in is an array to be sorted. Now, first thing it does is it determines whether that's a one or two dimensional array, because depending on where it gets called, sometimes it's one or two dimensional. If it's one dimensional, it means that you're just sorting by the values in the first dimension. If it's a two-dimensional array, then you're sorting by the criteria in the second dimension. Yeah, well, actually, in the second field of the second dimension. Now, regardless if it's one or two dimensional, an internal sort array criteria subroutine is called within this routine. So regardless if it's one or two dimensional, it's turned into a two-dimensional array if it is one dimensional, with the criteria clearly in the second dimension, second field, and then this routine down here always sorts on the second field of the second dimension and then returns back. So what you're doing here is you're calling a general sort array with a one or two dimensional array. If it is one dimensional, that's copied into the second, that one dimension is copied into the second dimension, and then sort criteria, array criteria is called. If it is two-dimensional, then there is no need to copy. You just go ahead and call this directly, and then it sorts. So this one always sorts on the second dimension, second field. This will convert a one-dimensional into a two-dimensional before it calls it. So this way you keep all your sorting in one subroutine, and then have one general sort array used by either callers that have a one-dimensional or two-dimensional with the criteria in the second dimension. And here's the subroutine that's called right at the beginning of that tag identification subroutine that just sets a lot of values back to their default settings. Next, going to discuss the VBA code, this clip-GIDS worksheet. Specifically, what happens when user selects a cell from column B or column C or column L, O, and Q. For user documentation on the selection of these columns, I suggest you watch the View Journal video around the 26-minute, 30-second mark. When a user makes a selection, the worksheet selection change event code is invoked here for the clip-GIDS worksheet. And here you see what happens when a cell in column B is selected. Column C is selected, column L, column O, or column Q. So now let's back up here and go through a little more detail. What happens when a cell in one of these particular columns is selected. So here, if a user selects a tag name in column B, it calls a function called TagGIDS. The reason it doesn't process it in line is because TagGIDS is called from two different places, either here when a cell in column B is selected, or on the View Journal worksheet when cell H8, a tag name, is selected from there. This function called as well. So let's go look at this function. Okay, the first thing that's done is it verifies it's a valid tag name has been selected, which will be the case if it user selected from the populated list. If they selected way down in the column where it's blank and then it would come back not being on the list. Then it goes and it grabs from the View Journal worksheet itself the current rows. And the reason it goes back to the original View Journal worksheet is that the user, between selecting the portfolio and at this point selecting a tag name from column B, they could have hidden certain rows. So go back and grab enough columns, including the column that contains whether the row is currently hidden or not, which is BA. And then it loops through each journal entry and checks its comment to see if it contains the tag that's being requested by the user. Notice here that it also looks at this column BA to see if the row in the journal is currently hidden or not. So the searching is only done on visible rows. And then as it finds a valid tag, it then records that in this array, VJIT array. And then in the second field of the second dimension, records the search criteria that the user is interested in, either the date or the total price. And then it loops this around for every journal entry in the View Journal worksheet. Then when it's done, it puts the JIDs that were associated with each one of those journal entries. If it had a found tag name, it puts its JID on the clipboard. If the user were to select from column C a particular JID, the JID is just simply put on the clipboard. Now, a less obvious line of code is when it goes to determine the row number, it looks against the current View Journal worksheet because the user could have possibly moved rows around between the time the portfolio was selected and now when the user is interested in the row number of a specific JID. If the user selects a cell in column L looking for a specific check number, so it loops through all the journal entries looking for that specified check number. Notice here it looks in column BA, so it's only looking in currently visible rows. And if it finds a check number, then places the JID number in the clipboard. If the user selects a cell in column O, very similar code as we've seen before, but in this case looking for a specific ticker associated with the journal entry, and if it matches, it puts the JID of that journal entry in the clipboard. And then down here, column O looks for a specific transaction type associated with the journal entry, and if it matches, it puts the JID in the clipboard. Now over here on the View Journal worksheet VBA code, as already mentioned, if the user were to select a specific tag name from cell H8, it calls this function that we've already discussed, namely tag JIDs. And if the user were to enter a searchable string in H7, that string would be searched for across all the journal entries in the comment, and only searching currently viewable journal entries in the View Journal worksheet. And the found JIDs are then placed in the clipboard. Next, going to discuss how the user selected visible period was implemented by primarily looking at VBA code snippets from the View Journal module. For more information on this feature, watch the View Journal video around the 3-minute mark. As a reminder, when a portfolio is retrieved, the tag identification subroutine is called, and as it loops through all the comments of journal entries, it looks for a special tag name of period, P-E-R-I-O-D, preceded by 3 vertical bars. Associated with this special tag is a parameter that can be one of the following values. You can have the tag with the word inception, year to date, 12 months, 6 month, 3 month, 1 month, or a custom date. The parameter for the most recent period tag name found in the journal is stored in this variable here called auto period. And then at the very end of the tag identification subroutine, auto period value is placed in the Manage worksheet in cell F30. If no journal entry in the portfolio contains a special visible period tag, then the default value for F30 is used. It is set by this clear-up code that is run every time a new portfolio is selected. Also, similar code is run whenever the spreadsheet is open or closed. Another reminder, a user enters the special tag in the journal worksheet. It is checked to make sure that it's properly formed, meaning that it has one of these values as a parameter or a valid custom date. If not, an error is displayed and the update does not occur. Make note that rows are hidden on the View Journal worksheet when the worksheet is selected and the value in cell C6 is changed. Based on the change value in C6, a date is placed in C7. If C6 is changed to custom, it is assumed a date was placed in C7 before selecting custom in C6. Journal entries with dates that precede the date in C7 are hidden. Journal entries with dates equal to or after the date in C7 remain visible. If a portfolio has journal entries, a minimum of one row remains visible. This means a portfolio must have at least one journal entry for rows to be hidden. As already mentioned, in order for rows to be hidden on the View Journal worksheet, the worksheet must be activated and cell C6 value changed, which is typically done by selecting from a drop-down menu. Let's review the VBA code associated with these events. First, let's look at the worksheet change event code when cell C6 changes values. The first thing done is to check if there's at least one journal entry in the portfolio. This is indicated by a date being in cell C10. If cell C10 is blank, then cell C7 is clear, which indicates no rows are hidden. If a portfolio contains at least one journal entry, the current row where visibility starts is noted. Cell C5 is set to 10 by default when a portfolio was first retrieved. Next, the date to start visibility based on the change value in C6 is determined. The date cannot be larger than the date of the last journal entry, and the date cannot be smaller than the date of the first journal entry. Next, the first row with the date matching or greater than the starting visibility date is determined. The journal is searched from the first to the last journal entry. If the row found is different than the row noted earlier, then a new range of rows are hidden, starting with the first row in the journal to the row before the row found. Notice that all rows are made visible before hiding the new range of rows. This is done to ensure only desired rows are hidden. Cell C5 is then set to the new found row. Finally, the worksheet is scrolled to the bottom and the cursor moved to the last row in the journal. Since rows on the View Journal worksheet are only hidden when a change is made to cell C6, the View Journal worksheet must be selected in order to make a change to cell C6. Let's now review the VBA code that is executed when the View Journal worksheet is activated. When the View Journal worksheet is activated, a check is made to see if this is the first activation since the portfolio was retrieved. If it is the first activation, the worksheet is scrolled back to column A and row 1, and the cursor is moved to cell A1. Scrolling and cursor movement require the worksheet to be activated, so not done when the portfolio first retrieved. Instead, postpone the worksheet is activated by the user. Note filtering has already been turned off while retrieving the journal entries. Next, C6 is changed to the value in cell F30 on the Manage worksheet. This change invokes the change event code for cell C6 just discussed. So, in summary, hiding rows on the View Journal worksheet is mainly handled by the C6 change event code. C6 is automatically changed by the worksheet activation code the first time the View Journal worksheet is selected by the user after a portfolio has been retrieved. Okay, back to the original video. Let's now look at the VBA code behind add, delete, clear, and copy. So the first part that you see here under the worksheet selection change is if a user does select really anything in the D column, it will highlight the row. So this has to do with highlighting and unhighlighting a row. Main part of the code is here is that you go out to the home page, grab the PID and the passcode, and then here's the add. Well, first it checks in here in the add section if there's valid tickers being entered in here in column D on the update. And it also checks to see if you're in online mode, which means that the backend SQL Server database is tracking these journal entries. But if that is set to false, then it's assumed that the backend SQL Server database is not being used to store journal entries, and therefore there's no point going further here in the update. Now that's a very rare situation where a user would set this to offline mode. Next is check to make sure that that we're not in a read-only portfolio, and then if any of those conditions are true, you get a pop-up message. All right, next steps have to do with parsing through the different entries that the user made, and it does all kinds of checks here to check the validity, makes sure that the ticker that was entered in is a valid ticker. It makes sure that the number of shares and just every field passes a basic validation test. And then if it does, it'll then loop through and call the journal to insert function to record the journal entries. And the next part of this I want to go through is if G8 is selected, which is just the clearing, and you can see here it just simply clears out areas in this workspace area dealing with the add. The next section of code deals with deleting, and it goes out and does some checks in terms of whether it's valid to be deleting or not. And then it walks through and deletes the different journal entries. And then when it's all done, it down here it has the clear. When the user hits K8, selects K8, it'll just clear out the journal entries. Okay, the last thing I want to talk about relative to this update journal worksheet is copy functionality. If the user would click on cell C8, and that's shown down here, where you can copy from the journal over into this workspace area, and you can base the copy on journal IDs that might be listed over here, or a pop-up appears and asks if you just want to go ahead and copy what's viewable in the journal currently over to this workspace area. Then that allows users to go through and make specific changes, and then add those changes if they want. Typically, to do an update though, you do a delete over here once you have journal entries, and then maybe copy over those journal entries, make edits, and then add them. Next thing that I'm going to go through is a group of calls that I will refer to as API calls that are used by this worksheet. A lot of what I'm calling an API call are actually these kinds of statements or calls to the SQL Server, where you're passing in a particular stored procedure, but every stored procedure, well, not every, most stored procedures require the PID and the passcode along with the name of the stored procedure. And then if the PID and the passcode check out, then the stored procedure returns whatever information that was asked for. Now, another style of calling is where you're still asking for a PID and a passcode, but you're not expecting any kind of or you are expecting a result set back. So you see here that when you get a result back, it's in these get rows. So either you're just looking to get a success or fail, or you're looking to get data back from the call. But regardless, you're passing in a PID and a passcode. All stored procedures use a connection string that includes a well-publicized SQL Server guest account and password. As mentioned earlier, the guest account is Polaris, and its password is welcome with a capital W followed by an exclamation point. The guest account has restricted SQL Server privileges, primarily just executing certain stored procedures. A well-publicized SQL Server guest user account and password with only stored procedure access, where each stored procedure requires an application account and passcode, is a common approach to providing secure access to a database. All right, some other just calls that are made is that price now, last date, price change, all kinds of functions here that are kind of internal that you can go look in that are, or I should say, generic in a lot of spreadsheets, but are used quite heavily in this spreadsheet. Here's some other functions that are used in the spreadsheet itself to do indexing and things like that. Historic, 3 months ago, 1 year ago, S&P 500, call to do isConnect, spreadsheet open to log user and things like that back in the SQL Server database, the last version, the public IP. All right, then the stored procedures are, you can see here the parameters that go along with them are always immediately following, but this is the actual header of the stored procedure back on the SQL side. But you call a stored procedure to get tickers you're interested in, to get portfolio information, journal information, see if a particular journal entry exists, insert a journal entry, delete a journal entry, things to deal with credentials, see if the PID even exists, update information about a PID, checking passcode, checking to see if it's got the generic Polaris passcode. You're updating a passcode, inserting new credentials, deleting old existing credentials, seeing if the pin is null, some things in dealing with access control, get messages to be displayed. Things to deal with the billboard, and then logging the spreadsheet. And then there's even a call here to get some idea of usage, back-end usage of the worksheet through how what we're seeing in terms of SQL Server usage. Next, I take a brief look at the back-end database used by the application. First of all, I want to show you that in order to log on to the back-end Azure database, you go to this URL and use this account. Now, the password changes periodically, and if you need to know that, you need to send an email to this email address to get the latest password. Also should be aware, and here we are looking at the SQL Server Enterprise Manager tool here in the background, but and that's the actual server name and then the database on that server that we're using. But to log on to the database using a tool like the Enterprise Manager, you would again go to this server name and then use the account stock, and then if you need to know the password to do this, you would also go to this email address to get that password. Now, there is another account, Polaris Welcome, but that's the public facing account that only allows access to certain stored procedures, and then each of those stored procedures requires both a portfolio name and a passcode associated with that portfolio, and so they're being authenticated on each call to a stored procedure. To show you how that generally works, this stored procedure that checks a password is representative of all the stored procedures that require a PID and a passcode. And you can see here that what they all do in common is they check the PID and the passcode to make sure they're valid before any other code is executed. Now you can see here that This simply says that if the total number of count where this condition is true is 0, then a error is raised and passed back to the caller of this procedure. If otherwise there is no error, and it's considered to have completed successfully. Direct your attention over here to the left. Let's take a quick look at the schema of this database. Here's a list of all the tables, but the main two tables are portfolio credentials and portfolio journal. Credentials table, as its name implies, stores both the PID name and the passcode associated with the PID, and also records access code information that if you watched other videos, you know there's a distinction between a PIN and a passcode. A PIN is associated with access control, read only, that kind of thing, whereas the passcode is just simply associated with the portfolio itself as to whether it can be accessed or not. All right, the portfolio journal keeps the detailed information about each transaction in a portfolio. Now, what you'll notice here about the tables is there is no table called portfolio, just itself, portfolio. There's the journal, and then there's the credentials. And by using those two tables, you can join them in such a way that you can recreate what the journal or what the portfolio is, but there is no specific table or individual table that contains nothing but portfolio information. It's derived from credential and portfolio journal tables. And to demonstrate that, let's take a quick look here at the stored procedure that's called to get the individual journal entries. And you notice here that all stored procedures require a PID and a passcode, and there's a join that's always done to make sure that the PID and the passcode are correct before the stored procedure returns its results set. In this stored procedure, it goes against a view called the view portfolio journal. That's over here. The view portfolio journal, it's just pulling from the table, but it's doing some recalculations of certain fields. Well, let's go further now, look at the portfolio. Well, you can see here the portfolio does the same thing. You pass in a PID and a passcode, and it goes out to the credentials to make sure the PID and the passcode are correct. Here and here, but there is no table called portfolio. It uses a thing called the view portfolio. Well, if we go out and look now at the view portfolio is actually just going out to the table, the portfolio journal table, and the key here is it then does a select distinct, and then here's an example of a call to this view, and you can see here that we're getting back for the model portfolio just the distinct tickers, and therefore that becomes the portfolio. Then here in the stored procedure, using that view, you end up with that portfolio view. All right, direct your attention back over here to the left. Let's continue going through some other things regarding this schema. The views, we already talked about the main two views, or the view portfolio and the view portfolio journal. And then stored procedure wise, we went through quite a few of the stored procedures already, but this just shows you the stored procedures again. And the two main procedures we went through up here to the right, namely the one that gives you the portfolio, and then the other one that gives you the journal. Now, the majority of the other stored procedures have to do with credentials. If we go back to the portfolio return app itself and unhide the credentials test, this test worksheet will call one of these stored procedures that deals with credentials. And the way that this works is you go over here and you select which of those commands that calls these stored procedures you want to execute. So let's do this first one called check the PID, and it's using these parameters model and then over here the passcode. Now if I pass in a blank passcode and tell it to check the PID, the passcode's not even looked at. So when I run check PID, it comes back and says, okay, I'll check it. I'm not passing in a passcode. and it says, yeah, the PID exists, essentially, success. Now, if I were to enter another PID that doesn't, like XYZ, and asked it to go check that PID, it's going to come back and it's going to say fail. In other words, that there is no PID by that name. It goes out there and checks the really the portfolio journal entries to see if there's any journal entry that relates to a PID by the name of XYZ. All right, the next one we can quickly do is you can create a PID. I'm not going to do that now. You can rename a PID. You can delete a PID. Well, let's do this one called check passcode. Let's enter in an existing PID, namely model, and its passcode is Polaris. So now if I go out there and say, let's check the passcode, it's going to check the PID model, passcode Polaris. We say yes, run it, and it comes back and says passcode is correct. Now if I were to blank that out and go back and call check passcode, it would come back and say passcode is incorrect. And you can see here that this is the stored procedure that it's running. All right, another one that I want to show you is called check Polaris. That just simply says we'll check to see if the PID being referenced has a passcode of Polaris. And you can see here when we come back it says success, even though I don't have a correct PID. It doesn't check the PID on that one. It's a question. Is it a blank, as far as the app's concerned, by using the word Polaris, is it a blank password or not? And so it'll come back success even without a PID. And then we can also do an update passcode. And anyway, you get the idea that you can use this to check out the calling of these different stored procedures that deal with credential checking. And again, those are these from here down to here. One other thing I want to quickly discuss is what's going on with the S&P 500 data collection. There's a view here that's being shown that just simply goes out and selects from the underlying table. Now the reason there's a view is just to put the field names of the table in a little more straightforward naming. So naming the first field the date, then the second field is just the value of the S&P 500 index on that date, and then what the value of the S&P 500 total return is on the date. If we go up here and look at the table, all the tables, you can see here that in this table that we're talking about that has a little more cryptic names. Those are actually the index names that, like if you go to Yahoo, that are used, namely the GSPC and the S&P 500 total return with a caret in front of the name to indicate to Yahoo at least that it's an index. The S&P 500 index data is used by the Portfolio Return app to compute alternate investment returns. The Portfolio Return app uses the view VW_portfolio_journal to pull journal entries. This view does a join with the S&P 500 view to get price of the S&P 500 on the day of the journal transaction. Because of the potential numerous journal entries in a portfolio, each potentially occurring on different dates, it would be too time-consuming to pull historical S&P 500 data from a web service in the application itself. Now, how this table gets populated is there is a nightly task that's scheduled on my computer, and it runs every night about 10:30 at night. And what it's doing is just simply going out and running. It's starting up a spreadsheet called the S&P 500 Daily. And you can see here's two different names. One's got auto close on it, and that's the one that's scheduled to run every night. And the code, if I bring up the other named version of it, it doesn't automatically close because it does a check to see what the name is of the workbook, and if it has the auto close in the name, typically on the end of the name, it'll indicate that we're in an auto close mode. So when it gets done pulling the S&P 500 data, it'll check at the end and then automatically close. So if you don't want to auto close it and you want to just run it manually, you would need to remove auto close from the end of the spreadsheet name. Next, going to review Module 5, focusing on code not previously discussed. And just going to talk them in the order that they appear in Module 5, so the order is not that important, or it really doesn't mean anything. It's just the order we find them in Module 5. So the first subroutine is this portfolio maintenance list. It's actually being called from or initiated when the user does a selection here and wanted to picks this portfolio name, or delete a portfolio, update the portfolio list. This routine ends up getting called to just do the maintenance. It does some prompting to see what, to get the name of the portfolio and things like that. But when it's all done, it either adds or deletes from the portfolio list. It adds to the end, or it just deletes wherever it finds it in the list. So at the end of this subroutine, what needs to be done is it calls a routine called Manage List to reorder this list so that there's no blanks and it's in the order that is expected when user does a drop down here in E1, that now these portfolios are appearing with create portfolio first and model portfolio always at the end. So it does constant, or this manage list function. You'll see here that it's called several times in other functions as we scroll down, and then eventually find the actual manage list. And so let's go through it real quickly here. It just it actually was a fairly involved function to write, and I'm not going to go through the whole thing blow by blow. It's just to suffice to say that it's doing multiple looping around the list to ensure that does it in phases, and ended up having to loop through 3 or 4 times. So it was a little more involved than at first thought, but hopefully the comments will allow anybody in the future to go that wants to go back through this more than turned out to be more complicated than expected function that manages the list. All right, back up here to the top. So next function that we're going to talk about that appears is it's called the portfolio billboard. It's just every time the spreadsheet comes up, it's what's displaying this in this blue area. If there was a notice that the Polaris team wanted to send out to every user, they would see the billboard message being displayed here. In fact, if I type in select a valid portfolio, we will see it selected. See here, when like the model PID is selected, now we see the billboard being displayed, and then as the user changes from one portfolio to the other, the multiple messages can rotate. It's not always the same message. So right now it's, I think, 2 possible messages that are just flipped back, and billboard messages that are flipped back and forth as users go from one PID to the next. All right, this next subroutine we'll talk about is called portfolio receive check. And here's the actual call to SQL Server, and you pass in a PID and the PID passcode. So it is PID based, and this is this function is called when a PID is first entered in being brought up, and then if there is a outstanding message for this PID, a box appears requesting that the user go check their inbox. And the way a user checks their inbox is they come out here and they do inbox. Now, assuming they do go check, then that leads us into the next function that will actually go and pull the next message. Now, a user could have multiple messages outstanding, so that would require the user to select their inbox multiple times to see the pop-up. But once they check the message and the message is displayed, it's then removed from their inbox. All right, the next function is portfolio send. This allows the user to send a message and then doing that again through this drop down here, where it's called question message, or even forgot passwords. So it's all the same. Just the message is displayed, and then this pop-up here tells them specifically how to write their message if it's relative to a forgotten passcode. So that's that. And the next here we have to do with access control. This is called at a certain point where a user is wanting to change their passcode associated with their account. Again, that's being done here through this E8, where they can select change portfolio passcode. Going down further, next function is portfolio maintenance PID delete. Again, the user can select from the E8, or if they're over in the update journal and they've deleted all their journals, and then at that point decide, okay, if there's no journals left, it'll pop-up will come up and say, do you want to go ahead and delete your portfolio? So regardless of how it gets called, its purpose is to delete a portfolio. Next one we'll talk about is name change. That's being done again over here, that if the user wants to change the name of their portfolio, this function or subroutine gets called. Next one is if they want to change their passcode, that's done through that E8 drop down as well. Portfolio authentication, we've already talked about that one earlier in this video, so I won't go through it again. Some of these are a low-level function that has to do with authenticating, but has to do with interpreting a completion status coming back from a call to this backend SQL Server database. Portfolio credentials, this is a quick check to see if user has entered in valid credentials or not. This one is a check to see if the credentials even exist. Really, it's a check to see if the portfolio exists and whether a new portfolio needs to be created. Here's just a check of the passcode that's being entered, and then if a new portfolio is being created, that will result in a new credentials being stored, both the new PID name and then the passcode that the user entered. Now, I haven't explicitly stated this, but if a user selects blank password, what actually gets passed back is the word Polaris. It's not possible to set an Excel cell to a null value. So in place of that, blank is implied to mean, at least in this application, is implied to mean non-existent. All the stored procedures that do some kind of credential checking explicitly check for a blank passcode and returns failure if it sees that the passcode is set to blank, because no portfolio can have a blank passcode. Outside of blank, any text will be stored as a passcode for a portfolio, including the word Polaris. So if Polaris is stored and then later retrieved, it's the application that reinterprets the meaning of Polaris and essentially presents to the user that is a blank passcode. The issue boils down to not having a way to express null and then using blank to mean null or non-existent. And now with blank meaning non-existent, need a way to express a blank passcode, and that's what the word Polaris is used for. The distinction between blank and non-existent or null comes into play when a user creates a new portfolio and then inadvertently selects a blank passcode and then is prompted, do they really want a blank? And if they say no, we're in the middle of a loop and need to go ahead and submit what we have to be validated by the stored procedure. So we send a blank passcode and then it fails, and then we just loop back through and ask for yet another passcode. All right, moving on to the next function. This function here literally checks to see if the passcode associated with the portfolio is the word Polaris, which essentially means it's blank. And then it just simply returned yes, success, meaning yes, it is password or passcode is Polaris, or failed, no, it's something else besides Polaris or blank. Next function is this is a update of the PID name, but you've got to still enter a valid passcode and then the new PID, and then this updates the this next function updates the passcode. Next function does a delete. This function will look to see if a PIN. Now, PIN we haven't talked about, but a PIN is different than a passcode. A PIN has to do with a read-only type setup, and then who can actually make changes to whether a let me show you what I'm talking about. Is over here. If you're doing selection here where you want to do anything related to access code, and if you make it read-only, you must associate with that action a PIN, and then the PIN must be provided if you ever want to take it out of read-only mode. Okay, this next function has to do more with access, that same drop-down that I just went through, that from E8, if you want to change your access control, which is essentially mean you want to change it to read-only or take it out of read-only. This function here is grabbing the tickers associated with the portfolio to be displayed, and then this is the function that goes and queries the back-end database to get the portfolio entries, and then we do a query here or a function called go get the journal entries from the back-end SQL Server database. This is just simply a function call to see if any journal entries exist or not for a particular PID, and then here's a call to enter a new journal entry, a call to delete a journal entry. Next function is the billboard that we talked about, which again is this area up here that's specific to the PID. And the next one is a message board, which is a general message that could be displayed if there is a message when the spreadsheet is first brought up and a first PID is accessed. If there's just a general message that wants for all users that is to be displayed, this function will go grab that message. The next here is a check to see if there's is any outstanding messages. And then this is actually go get the message that's been received. And then here's the send message. Here's the function to log, send back public IP and the passcode, and log it in the backend SQL Server database. And then the manage list, which we talked about earlier. This function here goes out to SQL Server and grabs some specific information about risk-free rates of return and things like that that are displayed on the portfolio or view portfolio worksheet. And then the cleanup we went through already. Okay, well that's a wrap on this code review on the portfolio return app.